Ooh, that looks tasty. Welcome folks, today the Hungry Gamer is back with another game review, and today we're talking about Zombicide, White Death, published by Simon and Asmodee, and designed by Raphael Guiton, Jean-Baptiste Lulien, Nicolas Raoult, with art by Jeremy Masson, and I do apologize for mispronouncing probably all of those names. Now, what this game is before I get started, thank you to Asmodee for sending me a copy of this game to review. And what this game is this is the latest iteration of Zombicide, which is a long-lived franchise from Simon. And this one in particular is the latest in the fantasy realm of Zombicide, which is White Death, Black Plague, and the Green Horde, this one being White Death. And in this game, you'll take control of 6 heroes as they are trying to save Winterguard from the zombie invasion. And the last thing I'll say before I get started is if you have Black Plague or Green Horde, or really any of the expansions for any of these, then you can mix and match a lot of the abominations, and the different heroes can be pulled into this game with minimal effort. Though what you're seeing here is just the retail edition of Zombicide White Death. And this is a dice-chucking, beer and pretzels adventure game where you're going to kill as many zombies as you possibly can. Now, the core gameplay loop is pretty simple, and what you're seeing here is actually the setup for the very first scenario. I have some zombies over here that are kind of making some shadow from my side light. But what you're seeing here is the tutorial mission. And in the tutorial mission, what you have to do is get to these 2 equipment caches and collect all the stuff before one of you dies. And it's fairly simple. As you go through the game, there are more and more difficult objectives, and every game has a different objective, which is managed around this base idea of a dice-chucking adventure dungeon crawl style game. Now, if you are not interested in how this game is played, so we'll jump into my final thoughts, then you want to go to the timestamp on the screen right now. For those of us still here, let's talk about how this game is played. The core gameplay arc is exceedingly simple. At the beginning of the game, each hero will have a little bit of gear, and they will have a board like this. And what you're seeing here is you're seeing a place to track their adrenaline, which is experience, and every time they go up to a new color level, they'll get to unlock something new. So if I got up to yellow, I would unlock an additional action. If I get up to orange, then I get to pick one of these skills here. If I get up to red, I get to pick one of those skills over there. And as you're playing through, you're going to be collecting different gear. So right now, Yasuke here has a katana, but you'll see on his body, he could actually hold another katana there, or he could use that space for some armor, and on the other arm there, he could have some other gear. Maybe he has another weapon, or maybe he has a shield, whatever it may be. And then over here, he has a backpack for 5 pieces of gear, like so. Then over here we have life, which is 4, and their actions. You'll notice when you get to the second spot here, you actually unlock another action, thus giving yourself 3 actions per turn. And on your turn, you can do a variety of things. For an action, you can do a move, simply move 1 space. If you're in a building that has no zombies in it, you can do a search action, which means you're simply going to draw some gear from the massive pile of loot, like so. You can do a reorganize or trade, which means you're exchanging equipment with any other survivor that's in the same zone as you are, like so. You can do combat, which I'll talk about in just a minute. If you have some kind of equipped enchantment, you can do those actions. You can activate an objective, which, as I mentioned in this tutorial, it's simply gathering all this gear, so I could be here and I could simply take one of those as part of my objective. You can do nothing, which is lame. You can make noise, which means wherever you are, you're going to make a racket, which is basically going to be how the zombies determine their target. If they're right next to you, they're going to hit you, but otherwise they're going to go towards whatever the most noise is. So you can actually kind of manage where bad guys are going to go by making a lot of noise and kind of getting out of the way. Or if there are guards in the game, and there are guards later on, you can have the guards do various actions. So the only thing I want to talk about right now is how combat works. And combat is fairly simple. So right here, we'll just pretend that our hero Genya here is facing down two regular walkers. For that fight, I would look at what is her weapon. In this case, she has a greatsword. And so I can see that she is going to attack at a range of 0, which means only in the same space. It's not going to make any noise. And she's going to roll 5 dice. And each of those dice are going to do 1 damage on a 5+. So I roll these 5 dice. And you see I have 1, 2, 3 hits, so both of these would be eliminated. And I would gain 1 adrenaline for each. Now that seems fairly simple. However, you'll notice this only does 1 damage unless I were to roll a 6+. And when you face off with some of the bigger enemies, like the brutes here, they take 2 damage. So if I didn't roll any 6s, I would actually do nothing to the brute. If you have a weapon that's going to do 2 damage, then you can kill the brutes. Then, however, there's also the abominations. And the abominations are going to take 3 damage to kill. And for the most part, you cannot do 3 damage in the game. And so for that, you're going to be relying on the environment. Now, in the tutorial, this is not a thing, but as you go through, you might have cauldrons of scalding oil, which will kill everything that it hits. However, it's going to take 3 actions, meaning you have to at least get to the first level up, the yellow adrenaline zone, to be able to do that at all. And then you can dump the oil and kill things. There's a dragon fire you can use. But for the most part, when abominations show up, you are in trouble. Then there's also the necromancer. And I'm going to show you how spawning works in just a moment, but the necromancer is going to chill out on the place that it spawns for the entirety of its existence. And what it's going to do is every round, it's going to extend this kind of corruption zone from its spawn point. And if at any point this corruption reaches all the way over here to this beacon, you will instantly lose the game. However, if you do kill the necromancer or an abomination, you're going to get a bit of legendary treasure, which are these cards here, which are very simply put, very, very powerful weapons or enchantments or spells or whatever it may be. However, I do want to show you one more thing that comes into play a lot in the White Death version of the game that perhaps you don't see in the other versions. And I don't know that for sure because I actually have not played any of the other Zombicides other than Massive Darkness, which is not Zombicide, but very much the same type of system. So what you're seeing here is you're seeing a wall. And so the heroes can go up the stairs, or they can climb up rope ladders to get up onto the wall. And so what's going to happen is the wall is actually going to keep any zombies from getting to our heroes unless a certain zombie spawn card is pulled. And again, I'm going to talk about the zombie turns in just one moment. However, on the other hand, if zombies happen to be up on the walls, the heroes actually have to go down a rope ladder or down the stairs. The zombies, they'll just jump off because they can't get hurt that way. Now, after all of your heroes have acted, it is the enemy turn. And so what's going to happen then is all of the bad guys are going to move. All of the bad guys, with the exception of these runners here, are going to do one action, which is they will attack you if they're in the same zone as you. Or if not, they will move 1 space towards their target. And just a reminder, if there's a whole bunch of noise somewhere, even though we're here, these zombies would actually go this way towards that noise. Then we have these runners here, and they actually get 2 actions per turn. If they're already on the same space as your heroes, each one's going to do a wound, and you're going to get to pick the target if there are multiple options. And you'll simply take a wound, unless, of course, you have armor, like this heavy armor here, which then you get to roll dice to defend. In this case, every 3+ will block a wound. Very, very simple. Then after all the enemies have activated, looking at each spawn point, you're going to do another spawn of enemies. In this case, we have runners, and whatever the highest level of adrenaline you have, so let's say I'm at yellow, you get that many. In this case, 2 more runners. So these would come here on the 1, and then in this case, on the other one, we would get an abomination. Now, if you have multiple different versions of Zombicide Fantasy, there are a bunch of different abominations you can pull out, and then you can create an abomination deck. And this game does come with cards for every single abomination in all the previous games. So you can do that. If you happen to only have this version, this is the only abomination you have, called the Con Abomination, and it will show up. If any of the abomination has already been summoned, then pulling an abomination spawn card simply lets it activate again. And that's the core of how this game works. So, with that said, what do I like about this game? The first thing is, anytime you review a command game, you have to talk about the minis, right? Cool mini or not. And they are cool minis. They are filled with detail, good sculpts, and they look really good. And if I ever get around to painting them, they'll look great. And again, I'm not a great painter, but the way the detail's there, they just scream for some base color and some dry brush, and boom, you have something that's going to look pretty good. Or at least my painting style, good from far, but far from good. I'll also say I really appreciate, for those of you that aren't going to do any painting, they've made each different type of bad guy, hero, at least the ones that are the same height, a different color. And that's great, because you can just scan the table really quickly and be like, oh, runner, runner, I know what that's going to do. Okay, that's obviously a brute. I can see the size difference. That's obviously the abomination. It's really tall. Those are the guards. I can see the color difference. And it's just very clever, the way that they did that. And then, of course, the way they've done the character dashboards, it is really clever. The little sliders that tick over for the adrenaline, they work very well. The way it has the backpack, so you can put the cards in there, they're standing up, they don't take up a lot of space, very clever. It's just a very good system overall. The next thing I'm going to say is, this is a really streamlined game. There's just not a lot of things you have to remember. Outside of the stuff that I explained to you, there's like, I don't know, 3 things you have to know about. You have to know about the cauldrons, you have to know about the freeze tokens, you have to know about the way corruption works, the way it kind of turns into a thing that gets rid of walls and things like that until it goes away, but that's it. Like, there's almost nothing you have to know. I guess you also have to know how the walls work. The idea that the walls, they can't pass them, you can kind of see over things, you use line of sight, but really, that's all you need to know. It is a very streamlined game, and I really appreciate that. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. Next thing I'm going to say is, I like the elements of crisis management that this adventure dungeon crawl game has. The zombies are going to come constantly. You are not going to get any kind of a breath. Really, you may have a turn or two where you just obliterate foes around you because the dice really play ball, but odds are you're going to be overwhelmed. And what I like about that is it keeps the pressure on you to do whatever the thing you need to do is for the quest, which is the next thing that I think works well. Is, for the most part, you're doing something different every single time within the same basic rule set. You're going to be going somewhere, you're going to be doing an objective, and that objective is going to do something. But the way that they've broken it down over these 10 different quests, every single one, it feels like you're doing something different, and they're all telling a different story, and it never feels like you're doing the exact same thing. And I really appreciate that. I think that is spectacularly done in this game. Next thing I'll say is, I think the variety in the characters is pretty good. Even though your builds are going to be mostly based off the gear and the weapons that you pick up, as you level up, you have just little different options that you can take, which does make each character kind of start to specialize in different things. And at the same time, every game you're going to just kind of re-level up, so you're going to have the ability to kind of build them a little bit different. And I think that works really well. And if you're someone that has some of the other fantasy Zombicide sets, you can very easily bring them in, and it even has a way for you to kind of use the guards in a way that these other survivors are able to use. So I think it is pretty darn good character variety within something that is not overwhelming. Like I said before, same basic rules, some pretty solid variety in there. Overall, I think the gear is all, again, same realm. All the gear is pretty much doing the same thing. The legend or vault weapons, whatever they're called, they're going to do some stuff that might change the rules a little bit, but it's all written on the cards for you, so it's easy to figure out. But even within this basic rule set of what the cards are doing, enough of them have enough differences to where it's interesting, and it's always setting you up to feel like, let's go search again and see what I can find. Maybe I find something really cool. And so I like the way that works. All in all, what you're hearing here is this game is a really good beer and pretzels game. You can pick a scenario based on how much time you have, and you're going to chuck it out there, you're going to kill some zombies, you're going to get some loot, maybe you're going to die, and done. Yes, you can play through the campaign as a campaign, but there's no carryover. You're not keeping things in between missions, so you're always starting anew with no gear, and you're just kind of finding stuff and building up as you go. Now, maybe I read the rules wrong there, but that's my understanding, is you're not carrying stuff over game to game. Though, of course, you certainly could if you wanted to kind of really campaign it. Though, that would probably mess with the difficulty level as you go. So what are my quibbles with the game? Well, the first thing is, I mentioned this earlier, it has that crisis management vibe in the sense that it is a never-ending horde of bad guys. They are constant, and you're almost never going to get a breath. So you're constantly managing this, okay, well, you guys are going to go fight, and these guys are going to try to go do the thing and fight if they have to, and then maybe we have to switch because people are getting hurt. And that's where the core tension of the game is this crisis management that you're doing. And maybe that's not what you're looking for. There's a lot of different types of dungeon crawls out there, and this one is really hack and slash, do a thing, and get going. The other thing I'll say is some of the scenarios towards the end of the book, the end of the campaign, and to be fair, it does list on there that the game is long. Some of those can feel like it's really long, and sometimes they feel like it's a little bit of attrition going on. It's like, I just have to outlast these zombies to get the last MacGuffin that I need to grab. And I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing, but it really leans into that kind of crisis management, and it's just survive, which I guess is the point because they're not called heroes, they're called survivors. The next thing I'll say is you always have to use 6 survivors. And the rulebook gives you an option for using 7 survivors. But if you're like me and you're usually playing solo or maybe with 2 people, that means you are controlling a bunch of different survivors. There are a ton that you're moving, and the dashboards are great, and they keep everything kind of contained, but it's a lot that you have to manage. If you are the type that wants to really just solo something, you literally cannot do it without some serious house rules. Now, as much as I've praised the dashboards, I will say that the pegs don't fit in there easily. They get a little easier the more you go, and I guess if I kept going and putting them out, I guess if I kept going and putting them in and out, in and out, in and out, then maybe they would become a little bit easier. But for whatever reason, these pegs, at least in my copy, is a little bit tough to get in and out. And for such a really good system, that's a little bit of a bummer. The next thing I already mentioned is it's very gear-based. So if you're looking for a character that's really going to grow into its own power, based on who they are, that's not this game. You're going to be going out looking for gear that's going to make them work really, really well. And again, might be a bad thing, might not be a bad thing. And then the last thing that I'm going to say is the streamlined damage system in this game, I actually enjoy because most everything out there, you do 1 hit and it is dead. The brutes, you got to do 2 hits, but it's not you do 2 hits with your attack. It's you have to have a weapon that can do 2 damage. It's written on the card. And if you can't do that, you can't kill the brutes. So you have to kind of avoid them, pull them towards wherever it is you have oil, and use that. But the thing with that is, though, there ain't nothing, for the most part, that can kill the abominations. I'm thinking Yasuke, if he has a weapon that does 2 damage, and he's leveled all the way up to the red and the adrenaline, then he can do 3 damage on a hit. But you can't kill the abominations without effort. Now, I find that pretty darn thematic, right? You get the giant zombie thing coming in, you can't kill it, you gotta figure out a way to do it. But in a lot of dungeon crawls, you get powered up and you're chucking all these dice and you're gonna do a thing, you're gonna kill the thing and feel great. Well, you're not gonna do that in this. Again, I think it's pretty thematic, but again, is that what you're looking for in a game? The last thing I'm gonna say is, and I've already alluded to this, I think this game is best for one-offs. I don't think this is a game that you're going to... Now, I've sat for a few days and just like played through a whole bunch of scenarios, but I don't think that this is a game that you're really going to want to set up 10 game days to play through the 10 scenarios. Rather, I think this game shines as a one-off type game. And then you have 10 different scenarios that you can kind of jump into. And if you get like the extra character pack, then you have different characters you can mix in. If you have other sets, you can bring in the abominations. It's all set up for that really, really easily. So there you have it, folks. That is Zombicide White Death. I think, as someone that loves lighter dungeon crawls, I was excited about this game, but I was also a little trepidatious because I don't like zombies. I don't care about zombies. But I have to say, this game understood the assignment. It is the ultimate beer and pretzels game. It just nails it. There's enough variety within a simple rule set. You can throw it out there. You can teach someone on the fly what's going on. Chuck some dice, have some laughs, have a beer, and you're going to have a good time with it. And this is someone who doesn't like zombies. I enjoyed this one far more than I thought I was going to, and I'm really glad that I got to check this one out. So if you're somebody that is looking for a light, especially one-off dungeon crawl, one that has some really good minis, heck, you can use these minis in something else really easily, or if you're the type that's going to want to paint things, then this is one that I think you should check out. I also think if you're someone that likes the fantasy zombicides, it's a pretty darn good option. The few things that it has added. Now again, I haven't played the other Zombicide. I played Massive Darkness, so it's similar, but the way it has added the guards, and I didn't talk about the guards in my video because there's another level that I didn't think you needed, but the way it adds guards, and you're managing the guards, and all of your heroes have an ability that affects how you use the guards, and the way that the walls work, and just how streamlined it is. What a great way to bring in some of those other characters and just kind of dive in. I think this one is a really enjoyable game. It's not... Now, that said, if you are looking for the next Madara, the next Oathsworn, the next Familiar Tales, the next Tales from Red Dragon, and even the next Barnacle Bay, this ain't it. This is a one-off, good time, not going to take up a ton of space on the shelf. You have just the retail box, which is all that I have. So, there you have it, folks. As always, if I made any mistakes in the rules overview, please let me know in the comments with the timestamp so I can get that into the Klingon subtitles. If you found this video useful, please like, subscribe, share, maybe become a channel member. As always, thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.